So I'd like to introduce Jing Wang, who's going to be presenting Microblogging Practices of Virtual Organizations, Commonalities and Contrasts, which is co-written with John Carroll, right? Yes. Okay. Yeah. Jing?
Thank you, and thank you for having me here. I really enjoyed the talks. It's not very often that I can see such a diverse group of people presenting their works. So I'm Jing Wang. I'm from Penn State. I'm working in the area of human-computer interaction. And this is an exploratory study of microblogging practices of virtual organizations. And this is part of our effort to understand the work practices in virtual organizations in order to suggest design solutions of technologies and practices for their effective operations. I think this picture illustrates how popular the social media have become and how eager people are to follow the trend or take something out of it. After my second look at this, I realized that this highway is actually really crowded. I think it must be near a big city. It doesn't often happen near a small town in my school. But anyways, I think originally this cartoon was meant to show someone could face so many different options of social media services, and selecting one of them will lead you to different destinations. But I would like to take a little bit different perspective from here, saying that by focusing on only one lane, which is Twitter, or we say the microblogging, the cars, they may share part of the path here, but they will eventually go to different destinations, or even if they go to the same city, that they will have different events to attend. So which means that even for the different users who are using microblogs, they will have different goals or different tasks that they want to serve. So we want to understand how the different types of users use or leverage the microblogging services differently. And as the vehicles on the highway, the types of microblog users also have many different forms. So for example, the individuals both for their personal lives and within organizations. For example, I think Nicole's work was mostly on the individuals outside organizations, and what Matt and Peter were talking about today are more about the employees in organizations or some other different types of workers within the organizational settings. And also there are different types of users as the collective entities. For example, the enterprises as a coherent entity on Twitter, and the non-profit organizations like the NSF that we're all very familiar with. And actually what we are especially interested in are the virtual organizations, especially the work organizations that rely fundamentally on the internet rather than the physical proximity to operate. So we want to understand the effective models of these virtual organizations to see what role the microblogging can play in their daily operations. And virtual organizations are in some way different from the traditional, if we can say that, traditional organizations. So the first thing is they might be the early adopters of social media because most of their work are done online. And also they have a less clearly defined organizational boundaries because their membership are so dynamic and people join and leave, and it's very vulnerable membership maintenance. And also they may face greater challenges like maintaining common ground among different collaborators to develop a sense of community with the virtual organization, and also to engage and reach out to involve more contributions to the organizations. sometimes it's also very difficult for them to coordinate the work. And so related to that, our goal here is to understand how do virtual organizations leverage microblogs for their effective operations. And we also want to take a step further to see like what are the common practices and what are the different practices for different types of virtual organizations. So to talk about that first, I will briefly review some work and findings on the microblogging of individual users and other types of organizations. Then I will talk about our study as the comparative cases in two successful virtual organizations, Mozilla and TapIn, and then I will present some discussions that we have from our results. The microblogging of individual users, so I think that's most of the analysis on microblogs have been focused on. I think there are several dimensions that people use to examine microblogs. So the one might be the network structural characteristics of microblogs, like the following relationship between people and how the whole, either it's egocentric or the social graph that you can see the different structure emerging from that there. But what we are more focused on in this study is to characterize the content of microblogs. So I will mainly talk about the content characteristics of the microblogging of individual users and traditional organizational users. And here the individual users, so even though people label them differently, but I think generally there are 4 different types of content that people post using Twitter or other microblogging services. The first one is the information sharing, so people select the relevant information that they want to share with their audience. And also the activity updates is about their what they're doing right now and what has been changed in their daily lives, things like that. And random thoughts is like what has been said on Facebook, that what's on your mind right now. And also there are like interactive features of microblogs. And not only the purposes of these content are used for express oneself or seek and disseminate information, also like collaborate with their coworkers or even build relationship with people you might not know like in your offline life. And microblogging of other types of organizations, there are a few studies on other types of organizations as a user of microblogs. And one is, so basically these studies were trying to argue like there are 2 different types of content that an organization can post. One is the informational and the other is the conversational, but they were arguing like the organizations are not really utilizing the dialogic features to communicate with their members or with the public. And there's one study by Lovejoy et al. They analyzed the nonprofit organizations' microblogs, and they generate like 3 themes of microblog content, that is information, action, and community. And based on that characteristics, they classified the nonprofit organizations into 3 different types. So one is the information resource, one is the community builders, and the other is the promoters. And another study, like Jensen's study on the microblog postings, they were mainly analyzing the tweets that were directed to or addressing companies with consumer opinions concerning their brands. And their study showed that the companies were less likely to send me now type tweets, but more likely to send informational messages and try to engage their customers by initiating the conversations. But these all these types of studies on organizational users, they were trying to sample a large number of organizations to present an overview of the characteristics of organizational practices, but they didn't really connect those content compositions with a specific organizational context or their specific organizational work tasks or their primary goals. So what we are trying to do here is to do the case study of a limited number of case studies, but really trying to understand how their microblogging practices connect to their primary work goals. Okay, so the cases that we selected here, one is they are both well-established and recognized virtual organizations in different domains. So one is Mozilla, and the other is Tapped In. I guess most of the people here, they are very familiar with Mozilla, which is one organization is developing open source software applications, and the other, the Tapped In, which is actually a K-12 educators virtual community of practice. And the educators there, they were trying to develop their professional careers. And unfortunately, this organization was closed last month. But the time that we were studying it was like back to 2 years ago, and it was still an active organization. And the other reason that we chose these two organizations was due to like the differences between these two cases, including the domains that they are in and the organizational sizes. Like the Mozilla is actually much larger than Tapped In, and also their work tasks. For example, like for Mozilla, they have very specific goal of software production. So they have a variety of different work practices, like they have weekly meetings, remote meetings to discuss features and bug fixing activities, and also they have the planning processes of their large projects. But for Tapped In, people normally interact in a relatively closed space, and so it's like a virtual campus that you can bump into each other and chat with each other in the in a plain text form. And they also organize the regular group meetings to discuss like how to discuss their teaching experiences in their local schools. So we would expect that those differences will bring us some contrastive findings regarding the microblogging practices in virtual organizations. And so here is the data overview, and we retrieved the data by the time of September 2011. And you can see here that the creation date of these two virtual organizations' Twitter accounts were very different. And the amount that they generated are also the amount of tweets that they generated are actually similar, but even though Firefox, so we focused on Firefox as one of Mozilla's projects, and even though the Firefox created their Twitter accounts very early, but they didn't use it that much at the beginning. Probably that's not the time that social media has been growing very fast. And we also see like the number of followers and the number of following here for both organizations are reciprocal somehow. And also the posting date reflected on the frequency of their tweet post. And I want to highlight several contrasts here. So first thing is the tweets that mentioned others. We can see the Firefox tweets are much more conversational than Tapped In's tweets. So, and also like for Firefox, the portion of their retweets are much less than Tapped In's tweets, which means that most of the Tapped In tweets are probably like informational type of messages. And the retweeted and the tweets that retweeted by others, we can also see a slight difference here that tapped-in's tweets were retweeted much more frequently than Firefox tweets. So those are the quantitative overview of these two Twitter accounts, and we also did a qualitative analysis of the tweets that we retrieved. So we randomly sampled 10% of the tweets we retrieved, which returns 633 tweets. But additionally, we also examined the other users' public tweets that were interacting with the ones in our data sample, which is the 203 tweets. But we didn't count those tweets into the breakdown that we demonstrate here. And in the cases where a tweet serves several or multiple purposes, we only assign the code for the primary purpose to the tweet. So we adapted Lovejoy et al.'s coding scheme on non-profit organizational tweets, and there are eventually 10 different categories emerged from our data set, falling into 3 different groups of themes, which are the information, action, and community. We can see there's a big difference here of the breakdown of the information part and community part. That for Mozilla, as I said, the conversation is much more, so they spend a lot of effort in building their community. But for tapped-in, the majority of their tweets goes for sharing information. And we also can see, like for the action per se, we can see the details of these tweets later, but we can see the similar portions of action tweets in both organizations. So they might have some concerns not to like calling for actions too much to irritate their followers. And the common categories emerged from our qualitative analysis included 5 different categories. So the first one is the information I was talking about. It's basically the filtered information and resources. And the second one is the action type, so it calls for participation in specific events or activities. And the following 3 different categories all belong to the group of community building. So one is the recognition, appreciation, and compliment, and one is the responses to questions, and the other is the response solicitation. First, the filtered information and resources, even though this is the common category that these 2 virtual organizations share, but they still differ in certain ways about like what type of information they are sharing. For example, like for Mozilla, of course, it's more about the information regarding the software uses and its organizational plans. But what we found in our data set is that the information Mozilla or Firefox is sharing is only about itself. So it's only its own software applications and its own organizational changes. But for tapped-in, the information it's sharing is rarely about itself, but rather about the general education news and general resources that its members can utilize. And many of and another difference down here is that many Mozilla's information tweets are original posts, but tapped in they are mostly by retweeting others' posts. There are only like 3 tweets in our data set of tapped in tweets are forwarding their members' recently shared resources. And the cost for participation, so basically, for example, like for Mozilla, they will ask its members or the public to vote for their software applications. And sometimes it also leverage its current members or current users' social network to promote their products, like this quote shows that to help your friends also upgrade the Firefox new version. And for tapped in, it actually calls for participation in both its own events and other people's events. So it helps promote its members or its friends' public events as well. And the other commonalities between these two cases, the recognition, appreciation, and compliment refers to normally the responses to the favorable actions or favorable posts about the organization. For example, if somebody retweet the organization's tweets, then they would like to acknowledge that. And the responses to questions, normally the questions will be very specific problems that like the software users experienced during during the time that they were using the software or they're developing applications around the software, and also some organizational agendas that they might not be aware of. And the response solicitation here, it's interesting that sometimes Firefox they use very leading questions to solicit the positive experience to be shared. For example, like, what's your perfect Firefox moment? So you can only expect that, like, the positive experiences to be shared. And for tapped in, the responses that they were trying to solicit is more specific. So they also help their current members to reach out, and it's more like a public Q&A, so help them to find the answers to their questions. And we also identified 5 different categories of tweet content from these 2 virtual organizations, and they include the responses to complaints, the responses to requests, the value statement, and acknowledgement of current events. These 4 all belong to Mozilla Firefox, and the other one only is unique in tapped in, which is the reaction sharing. So all these fall into the theme of community building as well. What we meant by so here are the unique categories of Mozilla Firefox tweets, and like some other companies, that they will have responses to complaints about their software or their services. So they will try to take the opportunity to clarify any misunderstanding or share any plans that will improve the current performance. And the responses to requests, the requests are normally about like new features, and also sometimes the users will ask the Firefox to follow them as well. So the requests are something like this, and value statement is something that didn't emerge from previous studies in other types of organizations. For example, like it's not very frequently posted, but sometimes Firefox was trying to state what their software values. So like enables individual to create and build without permission or restriction. And the last one is the acknowledgements of current events. So it could be like some holiday greetings or some local societal events that they want to share with their members. And the unique categories of tapped-in tweet we found is the reaction sharing. So from this category, the tapped-in really behaves like an individual to share its reactions to others' tweets that are not closely related to the organization. For example, like one of tapped-in followers said, the Buzz Lightyear is real, I knew it. And then the tapped-in account actually gave him a very personal response that I saw Buzz too. So it has nothing to do with tapped-in's events or work activities. And from those commonalities and differences between these 2 cases, that we want to connect the communicative function with the actual role the microblogging can play to support virtual organizations' effectiveness. And first thing is that it can facilitate the recruitment and identity building, like the categories of cause for participation, response solicitation, and value statement. So it can help the virtual organizations to build a positive organizational image and to motivate non-members to participate in the organizational activities. And also maybe they recruit some potential members, and it could be even more critical. This function might be even more critical for virtual organizations because they're fragile membership. And also it support the performance evaluation, like the responses to suggestions and responses to complaints. And it incorporate the feedback from various stakeholders to help them reflect on their progress. And the last one is the enhancing member support. So it includes a lot of things, both informational support and emotional support, to also help their referral members with the current progress in their organizations. And the differences between these two cases, that the first thing is we can see the interaction-oriented versus the information-oriented between these two cases. So it could be due to several factors here. First thing is Mozilla is much larger, and what we found, the interactive posts in our data collection are really passive. So which means that as long as, the organization, they won't reach out to initiate a conversation, but rather they create responses to the others. So Mozilla has much more followers than Tapped In, so they have a better chance to have more interactions with their followers. And also the Mozilla Firefox perceived the microblogging space as an extension of their user support team, rather than the Tapped-in perceive it as an extra space for sharing knowledge. So it's an additional space for their core work activities that would lead to such differences. And I just talked about the internal and external information shared differently. And organizational identity and heterogeneity for Mozilla, it has more heterogeneous members, like both end users and software developers, and they also have social activists as well. So it might be harder for them to maintain a very coherent organizational identity, so they try to state their values from time to time. And also, the visibility of account manager's identity here, that the Tapped-in uses personal identity, and it's visible to its followers, who is a very famous leader in the community, actually. So the Tapped-in account could sometimes act as an individual to interact with other followers or other members in the organization. But for Mozilla, because the basis of interaction is their artifact, which is their software application. So they'd rather keep the account manager invisible in their microblogging practices. And some comparison with other types of microblogs I just talked about. The individual microblogs, the similarities that we can see both activity updates and information sharing, but we see more types of themes emerged from the organizational postings, like the action posts and the passive interactions and sentiment related, like the complaints responses. And organizational microblogs, so the differences between the two cases, or we say the virtual organizational microblogs, with the other types of organizational microblogs, like the ones in non-profit organizations that we saw, like the value statement and reaction sharing, that weren't found in the other studies. And so I'm here to actually seeking more suggestions to develop a more in-depth analysis on our cases, and we're also trying to include more different types of virtual organizations into our case studies. So right now, actually, we're looking at an online health community focused on the well-being of people. So we're trying to understand like how the new technical affordances can support different types of actions and interactions between those people. And I think that's it. Thank you very much.